Have you ever wondered what would happen if a king or queen died while their heir was just a child? It's a fascinating question, and one that the British Parliament had to seriously consider back in 1830. This led to one of the most interesting what-if scenarios in royal history. Let's set the scene. In 1830, King George IV was on the throne, but his health was failing fast. Everyone knew his time was short. The problem was, he had no surviving legitimate children. So, the crown was set to pass to his younger brother, William, the Duke of Clarence. Now, William was already in his 60s and also had no legitimate children to inherit the throne. The next in line after him was the young Princess Victoria of Kent, the daughter of their deceased brother, Edward. Here's the catch. In 1830, Victoria was only 11 years old. If both George IV and his brother William were to die before she turned 18, the United Kingdom would have a child monarch. This was a massive problem. A child couldn't rule in their own right. They couldn't make political decisions, command the army, or handle the complex duties of a head of state. The country needed a regent, an adult to rule on the monarch's behalf until they came of age. But who would it be? And how would they be chosen? This is where the political drama really kicks in. The government, led by the Duke of Wellington, knew they had to act. They couldn't just leave it to chance. The last time a similar situation arose was with George III, whose bouts of mental illness led to his son, the future George IV, becoming Prince Regent. But that was a temporary measure for an adult king. This was different. It involved a potential child queen. Parliament needed to create a clear legal framework. And so, they began drafting what would become the Regency Act of 1830. The big question on everyone's mind was, who should be the regent for young Victoria? The most obvious candidate was her mother, the Duchess of Kent. By all accounts, she was dedicated to her daughter. However, she was also deeply unpopular with the royal family, especially with King William IV, who couldn't stand her. He even famously gave a speech at his own birthday dinner, declaring he hoped to live long enough for Victoria to turn 18, just to keep the Duchess from becoming regent. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Duchess of Kent was heavily influenced by her financial comptroller, Sir John Conroy. Conroy was an ambitious and controlling figure who had designed a strict set of rules for Victoria's upbringing called the Kensington system. He hoped that if the Duchess became regent, he would be the power behind the throne. Many in Parliament and the royal court deeply distrusted him, fearing he would manipulate the regency for his own personal gain. This distrust of the Duchess and Conroy fueled the debate in Parliament. Some politicians argued that the regency should go to another senior royal, perhaps one of Victoria's uncles, like the Duke of Cumberland. But he was an arch-conservative and deeply unpopular in the country, so that was a non-starter. The debate was intense. The future stability of the nation was at stake. After much discussion, Parliament made a decision. The Regency Act of 1830 officially named Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent, as the sole regent should King William IV die before Victoria turned 18. This was a major victory for her and Sir John Conroy. However, Parliament also put some very important limitations in place. The Act specifically stated that the Duchess could not give royal assent to any bill that would change the line of succession or the established Church of England. They were making sure the regent couldn't overstep their authority. Another fascinating detail of the act dealt with a different, though less likely, scenario. What if King William IV died, but his wife, Queen Adelaide, was pregnant? If she gave birth to a child, that child would immediately jump ahead of Victoria in the line of succession. The act addressed this by stating that Queen Adelaide would become regent for her own child. So, for a short period, there was the potential for two different regencies, depending on the circumstances. It was a classic case of lawmakers trying to cover every possible contingency. The Regency Act was passed in July 1830, just after King George IV died and William IV took the throne. For the next 7 years, the act hung over the royal court. King William IV was in a race against time. His health was failing, and everyone watched nervously as Victoria's 18th birthday approached. The king was absolutely determined to live long enough to hand the crown directly to his niece, without her mother getting a taste of power. The drama continued right up to the very end. Sir John Conroy and the Duchess of Kent even tried to force the 17-year-old Victoria to sign a document appointing Conroy as her private secretary once she became queen. Victoria, showing the strong will that would define her reign, refused. She was counting down the days just as much as her uncle was. In the end, King William IV got his wish. He died on June 20th, 1837, just under a month after Victoria celebrated her 18th birthday. Because she was now legally an adult, the Regency Act of 1830 was never needed. It became a historical footnote, a law passed for a crisis that, by a matter of weeks, when the news of her uncle's death was brought to her in the early hours of the morning, the young woman who was now Queen Victoria immediately asserted her independence. One of her very first acts was to have her bed moved out of her mother's room. She then met with the Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne, alone, without her mother or Sir John Conroy present. The era of the Kensington system was over, and the Victorian age had begun. So why does this obscure act of Parliament still matter? Well, it shows us how vulnerable the monarchy could be, and how crucial a clear line of succession is for political stability. It also gives us a tantalizing glimpse into an alternate history. Imagine if William had died just a few months earlier. The Duchess of Kent would have become regent, with Sir John Conroy whispering in her ear. How would that have shaped the young Queen Victoria? Would she have been a puppet monarch? Would Conroy's influence have led to political instability? The Regency crisis of 1830 highlights the personalities and politics that swirled around the throne. It was a story of ambition, family feuds, and constitutional foresight. King William's desperate race to stay alive, the Duchess of Kent's ambition, Sir John Conroy's scheming, and young Victoria's quiet determination all played a part in this forgotten chapter of British history. It's a powerful reminder that history is often shaped not just by grand battles and sweeping movements, but by the fine print of laws, the timing of a single death, and the strength of character of a young girl on the cusp of becoming one of the most powerful women in the world. The Regency Act of 1830 may never have been used, but its story tells us so much about the world that Queen Victoria inherited and the remarkable monarch she would become. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this dive into royal history interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. See you next time!